So, key driver here is to define your objectives. Why are we doing this? So you have a variety of stakeholders, and a stakeholder is someone who can positively or negatively influence the outcome of your project or your event, as the case may be. So what do they need to drive business or be an advocate or increase their investment in your business? You have to ask them, particularly in an organization where, for let's say a distributor conference where there is a legal relationship between the attendees and the presenters. A lot of this data is very telling. For instance, I'm going to give you an example. I used to do a lot of work for Coors. And one of the questions we asked their attendees to their conference on the survey was, are you going to increase, decrease, or keep your investment in the business the same? Very telling question, because one could make an assertion that if Coors sold 10,000 barrels of beer and the distributors had 10,000 people on the street, each person is 1 barrel of beer, and you would ask the distributors after the event, I'm going to increase my investment. Why, or how? What's that look like? I'm going to add 3 salespeople. One could infer by adding 3 salespeople that they're going to sell 3 more barrels of beer. So there's a measurable investment right there. So how do we go get those objectives? We do pre-event qualitative research and pre-event quantitative research. A lot of times, one would go out and do one-on-one phone interviews to a small subset and have a small defined set of questions. What would make the event a 10 for you? That's where you're sort of heading. Well, I need to hear about A, B, and C, and I want to see this and that and the other thing, and I need you to show me this third thing. And so those can be created as factual items where you go back to your presenters and say, here's what your audience wants to see. And as opposed to a vice president of sales driven meeting, it's a customer driven meeting. They're hearing what they need to hear. Now, that does not say that the salesperson gets, the vice president of sales gets precluded from saying what they need to say as well. So here's some simple qualitative VOC questions. And I'll let you take a look at those for a moment. They're pretty telling and deep questions, right? What do you think companies should do to improve their presence in the marketplace? And so your answers might not be what you want to hear. So these are qualitative, and typically you would go and you'd talk to a small subset of people, and then you'd ramp that up from the answers you get here into some kind of focus groups to qualify, to make sure that those answers were correct, because given a small subset. So I'll read a couple. What major concerns and issues do you have that you would like addressed at the event? In your opinion, what does the event have to accomplish for you to judge it a success? What do you think leadership can do to specifically help you in improving your business? Very, very pointed questions. So you'd ask these, small subset, ramp it up to some focus groups to make sure that the answers you heard were generally correct. And some organizations will go out and do a pre-event survey to get quantitative data, such that they know what the percentages are or the ranges, and then, if you will, you'd go and ask those same questions afterwards, and you'd compare the delta in the answers to see if your event was effective. All right, so here are some event types and some typical sample objectives that you might have in an event, and I'll point these out. And so we're going to follow this user conference through our calculations today. So that's why it's highlighted in orange. But you can have objectives for a sales meeting, an executive team meeting, a trade show, etc. So some typical event objectives might be to enhance brand perception, to promote a purchase or an upgrade, to increase customer loyalty, to understand customer needs, or to grow the event next year. And you can put some weights on those as you think which ones are more important based on what your stakeholders talk about. For instance, if you are a trade show sponsor or a trade show organizer, growing future events may be real important to you because you get sponsorship dollars, it increases your revenue, etc. So this would be more like a public trade show, or even a private trade show where you want to increase your trade show and exhibit space. And so that may be, as the event owner, I want to grow future events. What am I going to do that? All right. So the step 2, define quantifiable metrics. So what, as measured by how? One time we were working with somebody, and it was a user conference, and we said, well, what are your objectives? Well, we want our users to like us. How are you going to measure that? So they didn't have any idea. We want them to like us. That didn't really mean anything, so you couldn't put anything against that. So we helped them define what like looked like in terms of increasing business, etc. So we're going to talk about those quintessential values, intentions, preferences, perceptions, attitudes, abilities, and behaviors. Those are the only things you can change in attendees of your events. Some of them are a lot easier to measure, and some of them are a little bit harder to measure.